Well, welcome to this Selling Travel TV presentation. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by one of the doyens of the US travel industry, a man who has seen it all and done just about everything and been a champion of travel to the US, particularly to his home state, Louisiana, for the past 40 years. Before I introduce him, let me tell you a little bit about him. Mike Prejean began his career in tourism in 1981. Drawing upon his years of living overseas as a professional dancer to create heritage tours for servicing groups throughout the great state of Louisiana, including the iconic Delta Queen Steamboat Company. He then spent 6 years based in Bayou La Fourche, his home area, creating, selling and servicing motor coach itineraries throughout Louisiana. After serving as a board member for the Louisiana Travel Association, he joined the RTA staff and promoted public-private marketing co-ops as the field representative for New Orleans and southeastern Louisiana. With a background in foreign languages, product development, marketing co-ops, and intercultural studies, Mike has been handling international marketing duties for the Louisiana Office of Tourism since 1995. Also with us today is Neil Jones of Travel and Tourism Marketing, one of the UK's leading travel representation and PR companies. A US specialist who look after the affairs of Louisiana in the UK and who have worked with Mike for several years. Welcome, gentlemen.
Nice to be here.
Okay.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
Where are you speaking to us from today, Mike?
I'm in the state capital of Louisiana, Baton Rouge. Right outside is the Mississippi River with all the steamboats that have all started up again. So we're real happy about that. The overnight steamboats that go New Orleans to Memphis.
Great. How about you, Neil? Somewhere slightly less exotic, I'm imagining.
Slightly cooler, I'm sure. I'm in West Sussex countryside, so I'm looking out my patio doors out to the fields and the sheep in the distance.
Okay. Well, but as I said, thanks for joining us, Mike. I think my first question to you needs to be this one. With so much experience and knowledge of both Louisiana and the US, and of course, international markets, particularly the UK, why on earth are you giving it up all now to retire when the industry is going to need you more than ever?
Probably because I'm getting old, you know. So I'm so used, my whole life I've been used to being somewhere for somebody else. So I have a huge family, 8 brothers and sisters. So I need to help them out, and you won't be seeing me gone. I mean, I told Neil I'll probably show up at every trade show and work the registration table.
Okay. Right. I mean, that preamble I gave, was that correct? I mean, how did you tell us a bit more about how you got into tourism and how?
Yes, that's right. I had studied indigenous dances in Europe for years, and when I came home, my mentor in tourism had started a tour company that serviced the Delta Queen. So I got this folk group, dance group together of Louisiana indigenous dances, Cajuns, Zydeco, etc. And we went to Delta Queen and we sold it. And we would have like 6 buses every time they stopped, and it became their top tour in the river. We take them to the swamps, we do a cookout, we have a dance performance, we teach them dance, and then we do a city tour. And that was half a day. And that's where I learned how to be a tour guide and how to service people, especially seniors. And that's the only way to learn it. Get in there and start servicing people. That's hospitality. And I've tried to carry that through all the way through. We're still a service-based business. You know, I mean, you have to provide information for the trade. We have to service the people that actually buy it. My daddy was a Ford dealer, a car dealer. So when I was 12 years old, he put us to work in the service department. So we're still a service business. I don't care how many OTAs you have, we're still a service-based business.
How satisfying is it being representing a state that is obviously so close to your heart?
Oh, actually, it was difficult. I could have never found this job on my own. I couldn't have made it. There's no delineation between my work life and my personal life, which is not good, because to me, it was the same thing, a chance to have a job where I could show people around and service people, be it on the wholesale or retail level, and use the languages and interact with other cultures and still be proud of your own. as well as understanding their culture, that was great, you know. And so every time I see somebody on the street or anybody with an accent, I always ask, hey, where you from? And do you need some help and things like that. So it's just fun to be a good ambassador no matter where you live.
And where did you first meet Mike Neal, and what's your sort of recollections of some of your best times with him?
I'll give the stories that are safe for the audience. But no, my first meeting with Mike actually was, well, I'd say 7.5 years ago, nearly 8 years ago now. My first trip to Louisiana, and or in this role, first trip to Louisiana at least. And the first thing that struck me is Mike does not stop. He is, I mean, he's the very definition of the ever ready bunny. He's going all the time. And, you know, I was fresh off a flight to Louisiana, and I wasn't feeling great that morning. And Mike was trying to dose me up with Pepto-Bismol, get me feeling good. And we were tearing around the state, doing all these different site visits. And, you know, I'm trying to put my best, you know, polite English game face on, and Mike's just tearing around. But the thing that struck me most, and it's kind of where Mike just mentioned there, is, you know, talking to people and that element of it. Everywhere we went, every town, every city, every village, every restaurant we went to, Mike would hear someone's accent, maybe on the next table, and he'd get talking to them. And we say, don't we, 7 degrees of separation, you know someone. It's 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation in Louisiana with Mike Prejean. He knows someone's auntie or uncle or grandmother. He's taken them around on tours, or they've taught him at school. And it was no exaggeration. Everyone we met along the way, Mike had some sort of connection to that person.
Cool. Mike, the travel and tourism industry has obviously changed enormously over the years that you've been involved, but how has Louisiana itself changed in terms of what it now offers visitors?
I would say one of the biggest changes I've seen is that every destination has their major city, their major hook. And the changes I've seen in the last maybe 20 years is how the rest of the state and other parts of the state have learned or have become known to some international markets. When I first started, you know, you would visit New Orleans, which is one of the greatest cities in the world, and you'd have a good time there. You might go out in the suburbs a little bit and see some neighborhoods, but 20, 30 years ago, that's when they started to realize that we had this indigenous cultural area outside of Louisiana that had been isolated for years, and now it's popular in America. And I think Brits have discovered it as well. So a lot of the tour operator packages, one of our biggest changes and biggest jobs, and Neil has done a great job on this, is as they're coming from Texas to Louisiana or doing a Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans trip, there's almost no visitor from England that doesn't go see a swamp tour or a plantation home during their trip to New Orleans. So I would say the biggest difference would be the recognition and addition of a new product outside of New Orleans and tacked on to New Orleans.
Okay, we'll explore other things you can do in Louisiana beyond New Orleans a little bit later on, but you've a career this long in tourism, you've obviously seen plenty of challenges over the years. Katrina, 9/11, the crash of 2008, and probably others that I've forgotten. But I'm guessing where we are right now with this pandemic is the biggest one of them all. How much of an impact has it had on the job you're trying to do and fortunes for tourism in the state? And how do you see the prospects for a return?
Not bad at all once we can get the borders open. I remember after Katrina, the international press was that, you know, Louisiana was underwater, but actually Katrina didn't hit Louisiana. It hit southeastern Louisiana, east of New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast, just as the levees broke in New Orleans. So all the news was the whole state was underwater, but everything was open in Louisiana. Baton Rouge didn't even lose electricity during Katrina. And so that was difficult to overcome that perception. Here with COVID, everybody knows the story. So in every destination all over the world, you can't go and do anything. But in Louisiana, it was strange. All of our attractions never closed. domestic Americans kept traveling, which didn't help our numbers, but they were able to stay open. And now that if we can get some of these international borders open, everything's in place to start having a good time again. So we're looking forward to it. And but our attractions kept afloat, so we were very fortunate with that.
Similar question to you, Neil. I mean, where do you see the USA right now in terms of when it might welcome back British travellers? I mean, I know we're taking a bit of a punt even trying to answer this, but when do you think that the USA will be ready? And when it is Louisiana ready for British visitors?
Of course it is. It's strange. Just yesterday, I checked before we went online. As bad as we did last year with our numbers, same thing with UK, we're just blowing and going on the vaccine. So it's 26% of all Americans are at double vaccinated. And Louisiana is higher than that. So, I mean, and of course, most of those are people who were susceptible to the virus. So it's great. I mean, we've lifted our, right to the west of us, Texas, and to the east is Mississippi. They have no restrictions at all. Louisiana still has masks in businesses. So when you go eat at a restaurant or you go to a bar, you know, you wear your mask. So, I mean, you don't really feel it's that different. You just take a little bit more care. But the numbers are going very well. I think we're up to almost 50% with one jab, you know, and 26% with double jabs.
Sure. How about you, Neil? I mean, what are you saying to agents and other trade representatives when you're talking to them about Louisiana right now?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I actually had a call with our colleague Leslie in New Orleans just before I came on to join you guys, and she was saying, you know, they're starting to get musicians in the streets. The street performers are there back in New Orleans again. So the city is coming back alive, and that's going to be reflected throughout the state. So it's you know, we're a state as Louisiana that really is hospitality based. If you know you've got those people and you've got the visitors coming in, that's really what brings the life back into the city and the state. And the more that happens, the more authentic and the more kind of, it's going to be more like the experience that people are expecting when they come into state. Because I think that's the next important step, is that the consumer that visits needs to know what they're going to experience when they visit. You know, is it 100% what they would normally see in New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Lafayette, or is there going to be a slightly adapted version? You know, the musicians, are you going to have the full musical experience in a small smoky jazz club in Frenchmen Street? Are you going to be seeing the band behind a plastic screen? All that kind of thing. But I guess the reality is, if, and like you say, it's a big if, as of May the 17th, if people are allowed to travel, you know, Louisiana is ready. Louisiana has been ready. But we're not talking, you know, people aren't going to book and travel overnight. So we're starting to tell the story now and really get people prepared and excited to travel. And you know, we see business right through until sort of September, October, November. The weather stays great, so you know, it's telling the story now for people to book and get that sort of last minute trip in. And yeah, I'm fingers crossed. I'm optimistic. I think, like Mike said, with the vaccination programs as they are, you know, certainly the UK to US border has got to be one that opens in the first rounds anyway.
Okay, and you've been engaging with the trade, obviously, and travel agents over the last 15 months. Do you think any of these new ways of communicating are going to last sort of beyond this pandemic, or are we just eager to get back on the plane and do fam trips and carry on as we did before?
I think there are elements that will remain. You know, just looking yesterday, for us as a company, as Travel and Tourism Marketing, we've conducted and we've trained over 2,000 training sessions, or reached 2,000 training sessions over the pandemic in the last 12 months. So absolutely, you know, Zoom training or Teams or whatever you're using has been really, really valuable. But we are a face-to-face industry. There's no two ways about it. I think, you know, we had Unite recently as well, and to have meetings and be able to see people is great. But I can't tell you how excited I was yesterday to actually schedule in my first face-to-face meeting with someone, to be able to sit outside. And it's next week, and I'm meeting Suzanne Harvey at Travel Bag. But you know, it was such a sense of excitement to actually make a meeting with someone that I'm going to be able to talk to face to face, and that doesn't go away. We are a sociable industry, and that, you know, whether that's with a tea or a coffee, or more often a glass of wine and a cocktail, that's the way we do it. And again, down in Louisiana, it's the way it's always done, is with a drink and a good bit of food.
Okay. Right, Mike, back to you. New Orleans is of course a city that just about every traveller with an interest in the USA wants to visit at some point, and probably a lot of people probably think they know about New Orleans, its music, its food, Mardi Gras, etc. But can you give us some inside tips on what to do in the city? What else is there to do there?
First of all, I have to say, Brits know our music better than we do. And just look at what y'all did with the 60s British invasion based on our rock and roll music. You know, I mean, y'all are excellent imitators of style. So the music of New Orleans is so well known in England, and that's the hook that brings you here. But I would say, just like Neil mentioned, when you go to Frenchman Street, which we consider authentic local music, right there is two of some of the greatest bohemian neighborhoods in the country, Faubourg Marigny and Bywater. But New Orleans is just a city of neighborhoods all over. I would suggest, just as New York is pushing, that people go either rent a bicycle, or take the streetcar, or just walk to some of these incredible neighborhoods that we live in normally. You will find all kinds of enrichments there. You can't have a restaurant in New Orleans without it being good. I don't care if it's in a service station, anywhere. I would say get out of the downtown core, and just very close, so you can walk or take a bike to any of those wonderful neighborhoods in New Orleans.
Okay. Question for both of you. How does, or how should Louisiana fit into a South Drive touring itinerary of the South? I mean, what do you recommend? Do we start there? Do we end there? Is it in the middle? Or what do you recommend?
Neil, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, for me, I always recommend to people they finish up in New Orleans. It's the city itself has got this way of kind of, it draws you in, and it's such a sensory overload once you're there that you probably will feel like you want another holiday after finishing up in New Orleans. But it's a really nice way to round out any trip. We work really, really well with our Deep South partners. So, up in Tennessee, and we get a lot of people that will come into Nashville, across to Memphis, and then follow down the Mississippi, coming down to New Orleans, and whether that be through steamboats or rail journeys. You've got the amazing beaches in Mississippi and Alabama. So again, we work with those states. You've got Texas to the west of us, so you've got all that flight carriage into, whether it be Dallas, Fort Worth, whether it's Houston, Austin. But yeah, I mean, for me, the key really is to finish up in New Orleans. Two reasons: you can drop your car off and not have to worry about it once you get there. Mm-hmm. But it's such a walking city, and you can base yourself in New Orleans and do things in the surrounding areas to really kind of really get under the skin of Louisiana as well. And that's, I think, the other thing is that a lot of people gravitate to say, I must go to New Orleans. And absolutely, that's right. It's the jewel in the crown as far as tourism is concerned. But to really understand Louisiana, you need to visit Lafayette and see the Cajun culture. You need to see the river parishes, because that's where Louisiana's history was really developed and built in the plantations. So, whether it be as a hub and spoke from New Orleans and doing day trips, or a road trip around the region, finishing up down in New Orleans is definitely the way forward.
Sure. How about you, Mike?
Pretty much the same thing. Almost all of our visitors, except for people who are taking the nonstop BA flight for a 5-day city break to New Orleans, almost all of them combine either east or west, a Deep South music and civil rights tour, Atlanta, Nashville, Memphis, Mississippi Blues Delta, Plantation Country, New Orleans, or they'll do a Houston and Dallas, Texas and Louisiana combination, because that's just the most popular route, and that's what the wholesalers sell. There's a cool itinerary that all the wholesalers sell, Cajuns and Cowboys, which is a combination of Texas and Louisiana. We're right on the border of Texas. Texas has 30 million people. Louisiana has 4.5, and 1/3 of our visitors come from Texas. But this way, by moving around and combining these other states, you get a not just a cultural, but also a visual difference of landscapes, et cetera, foods, different foods, and that's a lot of fun to see indigenous music in different states at the same time. It's not, England is the size of Alabama, so y'all travel differently within England than you would in the South. Most of our visitors are the third or fourth time to America, and they want to see this authentic South that they've heard about. And so that's why they combine us with other states. We're a small state, so that's very easy to do.
For people who might, in the short term at least, be a bit nervous about going into the cities, going in, as you said, now into the bars, into the restaurants, what have you got in the state of Louisiana in terms of the great outdoors where people can, enjoy a little bit of social distancing?
Is that for you, Neil, or me?
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in and you can fill the gaps, Mike. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got national parks, we've got state parks throughout Louisiana. We've got, once you're in Cajun country, you've got lots of fantastic waterways, bayous, and lakes where you can get out and really experience the great outdoors. A hidden gem, almost, really, that a lot of people maybe don't think about is about 45 minutes north of New Orleans. You can be on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, and it's less than an hour from New Orleans, but it's a world away as far as the sort of scenery, and you feel the pace of life. And yeah, I mean, you can just walk around the outdoors and explore that way. So, you can be comfortable in the cities that we're taking the precautions, but equally, once you get out into plantation country and Cajun country, over to Lake Charles, you've got the Creole Nature Trail, which is all about being outdoors. You're immersing yourself in Louisiana's nature and wildlife, really. There's a lot of options, and as Mike says, we're a small state, so you're never really too far from the next stopping point. You've only got to drive an hour to 2 hours, and you're somewhere of interest again.
And just to add to that, he's right. All these things are set up for visitors. Creole Nature Trail, outside Tabasco Factory, walking outside. The North Shore is very bucolic and affluent, and it's just beautiful. Not to mention, in the north we have Natchitoches and the National Forest. But I wanted to add something about New Orleans. Even though people see crowds of music festivals and stuff like that, you don't need to do that in New Orleans. When I go, we walk the streets and our bars are open to the outside. Living neighborhood, real people live there with families and kids. So if you're in a bar, you sit at a table, you're right outside, the doors are wide open. So you can experience New Orleans, eat and drink and hear music without being inside a smoky club all the time. So there's nothing to be afraid of in the city as well.
That's actually, that's the best way to do it, I think, because that way you get people watching as well. And in New Orleans, people watching is, I think, Steve, you're down on the South Coast, aren't you? You're in a city where people watching again is also very interesting. But you can sit there on a terrace or a courtyard in New Orleans, watching all the weird and wonderful and the colourful people of New Orleans going by. It's
especially when you sit there and you watch British people who stole a golf cart after being imbibed a little bit too much, and you can watch them pass by on a golf cart which they stole.
This would be one of the stories that's not safe from the audience.
Well, I was going to ask you, Mike, some of your best and most cherished memories of a lifetime working in travel. Are there any experiences that when you're sitting down in a chair with a cup of whatever you're drinking that you're going to look back on and think particularly special?
Oh, gee. I remember I had to put on an event one time at the Aquarium of the Americas in downtown New Orleans. And of course it was for a convention group, and they love the voodoo and the palm readers and the snake handlers. And I remember the invoice came in and it was like $25 over what we agreed on. And I called up the Voodoo Museum and said, hey, you told me it was 1100, you charged me 1125. She said, oh, the snake gets 25. So I think my years, when I write my autobiography about years in the tourism industry, I'll call it "And the Snake Gets 25," or either that or what was the tap dance your way to cool.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, but final two-part question: what are you going to miss most, and how are you going to spend your time if you're not in travel?
Well, actually, I've been getting calls to do tours, just to be the tour guide on the buses, or walking. I mean, or going out in the countryside, because, as you know, tourism is it's concentrated in certain seasons. You know, like spring and fall are very heavy because that is our best weather time, and our biggest festivals are in the spring and the fall. And sometimes you don't have enough tour guides who know what they're doing. So if a company can't get a tour guide, they'll call me, and I said, sure, I'll do it for you. You know, just give me a few bucks. And that way it keeps me on my toes. It gives me a chance to share our culture with visitors. So that kind of stuff would be fine.
Okay, well, look, good luck with whatever you do, and enjoy your family time. You certainly deserve it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and you too, Neil. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Steve. Thank you.